Hi dear students, dear friends. Yes, now 86 days. 86 days, around 12 weeks. Yeah, 860 hours to 1032 hours in front of you. Yeah, this is the big picture of your prelims 2021. 86 days are left for your prelims 2021. Around 12 weeks are there in front of you. It is more than sufficient. Provided if you do that smart hard work, it is more than sufficient to clear these prelims 2021. 860 hours means 860 hours are there. If you spend 10 hours daily, minimum 10 hours daily, if you spend 12 hours daily, yeah, around 1032 hours are in front of you. Let me tell you, this is sufficient for clearing this examination, because already there are so many, just 80 days or 70 days or 90 days preparation, they qualified this prelims examination. So you must have a smart strategy of preparing this, okay, for these days. Should have a thorough revision of both static subjects and dynamic areas, and should have good practice of UPC standard test and UPC standard questions, and obviously previous year's questions. Okay, even my own students qualified prelims within 70, 80, 90 days preparation, just 90 days preparation. I'm not saying it is that credit goes to me, not at all. The complete credit goes to those people only, okay, who have put their smart hard work into preparation. So this is something, it is possible for all of you guys. Don't think about your past. Don't worry about your past. Maybe you idled your time in the last years. Doesn't matter. Still you have around these 86 days for clearing this examination, and you already built up the basics. You built up the basics in all your subjects. Now what you have to do is, you have to do very quality revisions, at least 2 to 3 to 4 rounds of revisions you have to do for your core static subjects and dynamic areas, current affairs. Okay. So this is our, let's call 120 plus series. Let's call 120 means you set your target in the prelims as 120. That would be a very decent cutoff UPSC. In the if you check the last 10 years trend, you can see maximum cutoff will be it's up to 120. So set your target as 120 in the prelims examination. There are so many who even cross to 120 also in the prelims. We are solving the most potential questions here. Yeah, with respect to economic impact of British rule in India. So again, I am telling you, I will give you an idea. Yeah, this if you are ready to spend 10 to 12 hours daily, I would say you can finish minimum 3 plus 1 plus 1 strategy. That means 3 core subjects. Static subjects you can cover every day. Current affairs, one slot is for current affairs, one slot is for your daily test. Okay, so 2.5 hours you can spend for each static subjects, be it history, economy, geography, whatever. One slot, 2.5 hours, one slot you spend for current affairs preparation daily, and one slot you spend 2 hours, one slot you spend for daily full test practice. Okay, even if you are practicing questions of other subjects, while covering these static subjects, you will be practicing questions. While covering current affairs, you will be practicing questions. That is okay. But daily you practice minimum 1 full test of 2 hours duration. Okay. So this is the way you can divide your 12 hours, daily 12 hours preparation. Now you have to spend quality hours, quality time, daily preparation, 10 or 12 hours of daily preparation should be productive. That has to be very productive, so that within 86 days you can finish and revise the subjects, core static subjects and current affairs. You can do maximum question practices, and definitely you can clear this year. With respect to economic impact of British rule in India, which of the following not correct, is or are not correct? It's a question I taken from this modern India. Lots of questions are asked from this area. Economic impact of British rule, loads of questions, and one of the most favorite strawberry ice cream for UPSC, favorite area for UPSC. Yeah, it led to deindustrialization, along with the loss of traditional livelihood for artisans and handicraft. Basic common sense here. It's simply your common sense. You need not to cover Shekhar Bandyopadhyay, Biban Chandra, Sumit Sarkar, B.L. Grover, etc. Just basic common sense. British came here, it is not for playing these World Cup football match, not for climbing up the coconut tree, or not for sightseeing, etc. They came here for business and monopolizing the trade. Eventually they established their colonial rule here. So basic economic impact of British rule was deindustrialization. Indian industries, Indian traditional industries were in a systematic manner, they were destroyed because it was a one-way free trade system. British goods are encouraged, British imports to India were encouraged, and Indian goods were discouraged. Both in Indian markets and foreign markets, Indian goods were discouraged, and Indian manufacturers found it quite difficult to compete with foreign goods and foreign manufacturers. So deindustrialization was an effect of impact of British economic policies. Indian leaders strongly supported various labor regulations in cotton mills in India. The labor regulations, see, regulation itself is a negative word, am I right? It will not give you any positive vibes. You see, putting regulations on something, putting regulations on your freedom. You see that in the cotton mills, so many, over this manufacturing of the goods and its distribution, so many regulations imposed, which was basically for promoting British manufacturers, British goods and their free sale, free flow in Indian markets. Okay, so regulations put on Indian markets and Indian manufacturers means it will definitely put Indian markets, Indian cotton textile industries down, upside down. So Indian leaders, moderates, estimates, everybody was demanding for promotion of Indian goods. You heard about Swadeshi concept, etc. So even moderates, extremists, every sections, they were demanding for removing these regulations from Indian productions, Indian factories. They were demanding for industrialization. They were demanding for better mechanism for Indian manufacturers, Indian producers, Indian textile industries, artisans, merchants, etc. Okay, so Indian leaders will not be supporting these labor regulations. They will be opposing the labor regulations. Second statement is not correct. Commercialization of Indian agriculture led to prosperity among Indian farmers. How it happens here? Commercialization leads to continuous famines. People were starving like anything. Bengal famines. You see that? People were killing each other. They were killing their animals because nothing to eat and drink. You see, everybody is starving to death. Continuous famines happened in one of the richest state of India, Bengal. That was because of this British commercialization. They forced Indians to cultivate cash crops instead of food crops. Now see, Indians were forced to cultivate indigo instead of wheat, barley and rice. And can you have indigo all the 3 times for breakfast, lunch and dinner? Indigo is not an eatable item. Indigo is, it's a coloring agent for this like a textile, for clothing. You can't eat indigo, Okay, you can't eat indigo as sandwich or evening snacks, etc. So they are banned to produce or cultivate these food crops. They were asked to produce cash crops, and for which poor compensation. So commercialization of agriculture leads to not to prosperity, poverty and famine among Indians. So third statement is wrong. It created a new class of absentee landlordism. Absentee landlordism is not connected with this thing. Absentee landlordism is connected with the Permanent Settlement Act. You know, Zamindari settlement. That created a new class of landlords who are only interested in revenue collection, not the welfare of this cultivation, not the welfare of the farmers. So in this context, what is not correct? The first one is correct, second is not correct, third is not correct, fourth is not correct. Your answer has to be Delhi, which is 2, 3 and 4 only. Moving on to next question. Consider the following regarding Ijara system. You should know that concept Ijara. Ijara system. What is Ijara system? What is exactly Ijara system? They agreed to pay the state a fixed sum of money. Ijara system is nothing but it is revenue farming, introduced in the 18th century AD. When you check the history of these later Mughals, there is Jalandhar Shah. During his time, Ijara system was introduced. You know, Ijara system is revenue farming. The farmers are not able to invest into the land due to calamities or maybe due to different natural calamities or different issues. They don't have money to invest into land. They are not in a position to invest into land. Now the land is given out on Ijara system to a third party, revenue farmer. Revenue farmer, okay, revenue land is given out to revenue farmer. Now he will ensure that the cultivation, and he has to pay a fixed income to the state, and whatever the rest he collected from the farmers can be kept with himself. Okay, that is the Ijara system. They agreed to pay the state a fixed sum of money. The revenue farmers under this system, they must pay a fixed amount to this government. If any surplus, additional surplus or additional whatever he collected from the farmers can be kept with himself. They were given considerable freedom in assessment and collection of taxes. Yes, that is why it was an evil system. They started exploiting the farmers physically, financially, sexually, mentally, all the way. It was a revenue, this farming, revenue farming, it was an evil system, and its latest version was that zamindari settlement. Okay, it was introduced by Akbar. No, it is not the time of Akbar. Akbar, you know that he is known as a generous ruler. He was known for his generosity, and people loved him. If somebody who introduced evil farming and somebody who caused so many damages to this social justice will not be loved by the people. Akbar was loved by people because of his policies. Okay, this was not introduced by Akbar. This was later on 1712. I mean, in the time of this Jalandhar Shah, it was introduced. It paved the way for ruination of peasants. Exactly. If something happened, you see, revenue farmers are there, they are collecting revenue and paying to the state, and they will not to say that, my dear farmer, you need not to pay, I will borrow from, I will take it from my bank balance, I will pay to the government, nothing. They will extract maximum from the farmers, am I right? Maximum from the farmers. So there is total, you see, terribly destroyed, his economic balance is gone, farmers, okay? So here your correct answer has to be, first one is correct, second is correct, and fourth is correct, third is the only not correct statement. Your answer has to be, correct is asked here, so your answer has to be 1, 2 and 4 only. There is another question which is regarding this drain wealth theory propounded by early nationalists. You have to check the provisions or features of drain wealth theory. The part of India's national income not available to Indians but appropriated by colonial Britain, it's exactly true. Not even a single penny is spent for the welfare of Indians. They are extracting this, squeezing this wealth out of the nation in multiple forms. You know, many foreigners are investing here. They are investing here, and the interest for their investment is paid from here only. Many are doing business here. The profit is, that is taken from Indian resources only. The company administration expense is, paid from Indian resources only. Military expense is paid from Indian resources only. Their incentives and pensions are paid from Indian resources only. Home charges are paid from Indian resources only. Okay, and these agents, company agents, they are getting gift and many valuables, that is also from Indian resources. Raw material buying from cheaper prices, that is also from Indian money only. All the way, the free one-way free trade policy and their investment policy, their industrial policy, what all the policies, you imagine, everything they are looting from out of this nation, not even a single penny they are spending for welfare of Indians. If they are spending something for the welfare of Indians, it was good. Not even a single penny they are spending for welfare of Indians. That is the biggest tension here. There, that creates that economic nationalism. Then see, theory was first propounded by this drain theory was first propounded by this economist and nationalist or moderate, that is Dadabhai Naoroji. So your answer has to be, both the statements are correct in terms of drain of wealth theory. That's it. This much is for today, and our humble request to you is, Galanda is providing you lots of this series for your preparation. Many series are there, so here this is Let's Score 120 plus series. All of you guys, please watch the series. Definitely it will be helpful for you, because such standard questions are being solved in this series. All of you watch the series, and from the very first one to these episodes, continuously you watch all these question discussion, question solving. And if anybody to subscribe our channel, please do subscribe and press that notification button, bell button, okay, so that you will get notification whenever the new videos are up. Okay, all the best. Thank you.